Om Tavakatamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavivireeditam Kalmashapaham Sharavanamangalam Shrimadatam Bhuvigananti Puriyajanaha. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on page 105 for those who are following along in the book. And this is the chapter called The Visit to Vidyasagar. It is August 5th, 1882. M had been coming to Sri Ramakrishna for several months, and he was a teacher in Vidyasagar school, and Sri Ramakrishna had an interest in visiting Vidyasagar, so M arranged for the visit. Vidyasagar, we know, was a very, very important figure at that time, a very influential person, a very philanthropical person, a great scholar. And Sri Ramakrishna always liked to meet any of these very gifted people. He had a tremendous belief that there's special manifestation of God in those who have some special skill or talent or brilliance in any field. There's a verse that we read in Gita that Thakur was aware of also, but we find that he tried to meet all of the well-known people, Dayananda Saraswati and Devendranath Tagore, Keshav Sen, of course, and many of the great pundits of the day, that he himself would go and meet them, and then he would invite them to come to see him. Sometimes a very close friendship would come out of it and great mutual respect. Other times it was a 1 or 2 time visit, that was all. So it depended on who was able to appreciate Sri Ramakrishna. It's interesting with the Brahmo Samaj that Keshav was the only one. There were so many very brilliant people there and people, dedicated people, but Keshav was the only one who fully appreciated Sri Ramakrishna. There were a few others. There's Trailokanath Sanyal, who was the songwriter. He also loved him very much, but none of them had the same reverence that Keshav did. Keshav was the greatest of all of them and had received the most praise and acclaim from everyone, was revered, and yet had that humility and had that deep insight. We'll see with Vidyasagar that he wasn't impressed to the same degree, of course. And he was quite a bit older than Sri Ramakrishna. Keshav was a little bit older, probably, but Vidyasagar was 62 at the time that they meet. And this, as far as we know, I think is the only meeting. We'll see later that Thakur invites him to visit, and he agrees. Thakur used to say that, but he didn't keep his word, and he didn't come. So we're in the middle of this long conversation, and I always like to turn these things, turn these things into a scene, a type of meditative scene. So we picture what's taking place. This was part of why M was so careful to describe everything. So it's very interesting to picture the scene, because all of the neighborhood people have come. They all heard about Sri Ramakrishna. They were curious. Not everyone had a high opinion of him. They all knew that there was something special about him, whether good or bad. And as always, there were many people, petitioners, who would come to see Vidyasagar to request help for something, for a scholarship or elderly widow who needed money, something like that. So there'll be all these people there. And Sri Ramakrishna, he'll be oblivious of everyone most of the time, it seems. Just conversation with him in Vidyasagar. and meeting him for the first time, and yet he'll start singing songs, and he'll start going to samadhi and ecstasy and all different things, as if they've known each other for a long time, and almost as if there's no one else in the room. So it's very, very interesting to try to keep that picture in our minds as we're reading all of this. Now, the last thing that we read last week was the story of Rama asking Hanuman how he looked upon him, and we saw that Hanuman spoke about the three different attitudes that he had, that sometimes he preferred this servant-master attitude. When he had that body consciousness, he liked to think that Rama was his master and he was the servant. And when he felt he was the jiva, then he was a part. This part-to-whole relationship. This is the qualified non-dualism. And when he thought of himself as the self, the Atman, then only oneness, the Advaitic point of view. So Sri Ramakrishna will start. The relationship of master and servant is the proper one. Now, why the proper one? What's wrong with the others? There's nothing wrong with the others. Proper for those who have this body consciousness. This is what Sri Ramakrishna very often said, that especially Soham, this attitude is not proper for those who are identified with the body, who have worldly attachments, who feel themselves to be the doer of all action, who have their pride and so many different passions and desires and everything. For them to say, I am he said, was not proper. It doesn't mean that there's something false about it. He is talking from a very practical point of view. So it says the relationship of master and servant is the proper one. Since, now he's giving this reason, since his I must remain, let the rascal be God's servant. Now, there's a big distinction between a metaphysical truth and a practical truth. The metaphysical truth is not only doesn't this I remain, this I doesn't exist. This individual ego is a figment of our imagination. We create it. We create it. As long as we think of ourselves in a certain way, that's the ego that we're creating. So from that point of view, from a very high point of view, there's nothing real about this ego. There's nothing substantial about it. From a practical point of view, because we always think of ourselves in a certain sense, we always have some sense of self-identity, the sense of I is always there. There are 3 times when that sense of I disappears. 1, when we're sleeping. Then 2, if we get very much involved in something, then we lose track of the fact that I'm reading a book. As soon as I start thinking to myself as I'm reading it, then I realize that, I didn't read that last paragraph. I looked at it and I read it. I have to go back and reread it. My mind was thinking of something else. We get deeply involved in something. Momentarily, the ego is not functioning. It hasn't really disappeared. It's just not functioning at that time. And in that state of nirvikalpa samadhi, in that state, there's no individual I consciousness. But as soon as we come back down from that state, the sense of I comes back. And for the God-realized soul, it's a ripe I. So Sri Ramakrishna talks about these different gradations of ego and different, there's a maturation process of this ego, getting it to ripen. To think that it will disappear completely means this very opaque, this very unripe green ego, that will disappear. It doesn't disappear, it ripens. It turns into something else. So we have that relationship with God. So the relationship is used in 2 different ways and at 2 different times. It gets us to the roof and it helps bring us down from the roof. We use that relationship in order to go higher and higher in spiritual life. Then we get to the roof and that I disappears. When we come back down, the state of the Vijnani also has a sense of I in order to live in the world and in order to relate to people. And living in the body and being able to live and talk with people and do everything else, the sense of I. But the sense of I now is not one that leads to any bondage, and it comes out of freedom. So what he's saying here is that since this I must remain, since we always have some feeling You ask anybody, who are you? They'll give an answer. Huh? There's no one, if we say, well, I don't know, that really means that, well, I'm still searching for what my ultimate dream of life is, something like that. But we all know, this is me. Yeah, we all have some sense of I. So since this I must remain, then how do we look upon ourselves? That's the question. If I say that I'm so-and-so, I was born in a certain year, I'm a certain weight, a certain height, all of these different things, that means that I've identified with the body, with my biological relationship, with my parents, with the country that I was born in, with the ethnicity that I have, with all of these different things. If I say I'm a child of God, I'm a servant of God, that means this I that I'm identified with is no longer this body conscious I. This will be some subtle I. This will be the Jivatman, we can say. This will be the spiritual I. If I say that I am the child of, and I mention the name of my parents, then it's the biological I. If I say I'm a child of the Divine Mother, then this I is no longer thinking of this physical body in the same way. Maybe we can say that the body was also created by the Divine Mother, but that mother-child relationship here will be more of this qualified non-dualistic relationship. I belong to Mother, I'm a part of Mother. Or I am a servant of God. Sri Ramakrishna would emphasize this servant attitude sometimes. Other times he would emphasize what he called Shontan Bhav, this attitude of being a child of the Divine Mother. Other times he would say they're all good. That it's a question of what your particular spiritual attitude is and what your spiritual path is. That these are all individual things. That it'll be different for everybody. But in general, he liked these two attitudes, the servant attitude and the attitude of a child toward his mother. And with him, the attitude of the child towards the mother was the one that he fell back on. When he did his spiritual practices, he went through all of these. He practiced the servant attitude, but as soon as it was finished, either he took up a new one, or in the in-between time, he would go back. This would be the spring back, the default mood. That for him, this was the one that resonated most with him. This feeling that I am a child of the Divine Mother. He liked to look upon God as Mother. He's talking to Vidyasagar now. And Vidyasagar had a bit of this attitude of the servant, because he was always serving people. So perhaps he was emphasizing that. But very often he would use this. He'd say, since this I must remain, let the rascal remain as God's servant. It was a very common phrase with him. I and mine, these constitute ignorance. My house, my wealth, my learning, my possessions. The attitude that prompts one to say such things comes out of ignorance. On the contrary, the attitude born of knowledge is, O God, thou art the master, and all these things belong to thee. House, family, children, attendants, friends, or thine. Now, Ami Amar, there's I and mine, Ahamkara and Mamata. These two are mentioned over and over again in the scriptures, and Gita especially, as a type of bondage. Because this feeling of I leads to pride, and this feeling of Amar, it leads to this feeling of mineness. It leads to selfishness, that this belongs to me. It leads to separation. There's so many negatives to all of these things because we're doing it in a worldly sense. The other way of looking at it, similar to the ego, we transform the sense of I and mine. And Sri Ramakrishna says, and many of the devotional teachers say, that we increase the sense of I and mine. That the devotee, especially in the servant attitude, has a very strong sense of I. Yes, I look at Hanuman. I'm Rama's servant. I can do anything. A very strong sense of I. And he belongs to me. And I belong to him. We have that relationship, strong sense of mine. That's a very positive thing. if we can have that in spiritual life, but at the same time, that my pride in being the servant is that I don't claim anything for myself. I'm proud to be the servant. I'm proud to only care for the happiness of the master. Whatever Rama will be pleased by, that's what I'll do. I'll give up my whole life for him. This I, a very strong I, but the servant I is not an I of bondage. It is one that releases us from the terrible attachment of that lower type of ego, which is always trying to seek gratification. It's always trying to seek some type of fulfillment, and always looking for other people to give some stamp of approval to us. Yes, you're a good person. You're very good. The I that craves that is a very weak type of I, and it's really at the mercy of external circumstances. So what we really want is a very strong I. We want a strong sense of ego, but ripe. We want to have this relationship. Yes, I am a servant. I always point to the beautiful few verses that Swamiji wrote, that he says, we can crush the stars to atoms, we can unhinge the universe. Don't you know who we are? We are the servants of Sri Ramakrishna. That's the perfect dasya bhava. And you see that the pride and this strong sense of I in a spiritual sense. This is what Sri Ramakrishna means. Give a turn, give a twist to these things. If you want to have pride, don't do it because of worldly possessions or because of individual talents or anything. Be proud that you're a servant of God. Be proud that you're a child of God. So, when he says, I and mine constitute ignorance, it's this ordinary sense that it's my house, my wealth, all of these things. And to say that thou art the master, all things belong to thee. House, family, children, attendants, friends, or thine. This, he says, is knowledge. One should constantly remember death. Okay, now, it sounds very morbid. What does it mean? Every minute we shall think, oh, will I die? And now with this coronavirus, this is on people's minds all of the time, and we find people dying around us. Does it mean we should have constant fear? What if we catch it? What if we have to suffer? We see that it's some terrible suffering. He doesn't mean that. When he says one should constantly remember death, it means constantly remember the transitory nature of life, that nothing will remain. We're here for a very short period of time. I remember when I was growing up, I used to hear very often a very nice little phrase. People would say, life is too short. Huh? Did you ever hear that? That somebody would get angry over something, they'd have a little quarrel with somebody, say, why do you bother with those things? Life is too short. It's a very nice way of looking at things, that this life will fly by, we'll look back when we're in the 80s or 90s or something, and we'll say, yeah, why did I get so upset over that? And made a big fuss over that and created an enemy over that. It took years, we didn't talk to each other and everything. Why didn't I realize life is too short, it's going to fly by, and I'll be so sorry I wasted time on such a trivial, insignificant thing. This puts things into perspective. Puts things into perspective for us, that the life is flying by. These things that I'm clinging to, every single thing that I say, oh, you can't have it, this is mine, I want to have more and more of this, I'll give up at the end. We won't take anything with us. Nothing in the world will go with us. You can bury it in the casket with us if you want. It's not going to help us. So this is what it means. One should constantly remember death. Nothing will survive death. This body that we think is such a wonderful thing, how we pamper it and how we... I very often think of people who have a weight problem. Whole life they're trying to lose weight. I've seen many people like this. Then they get some illness at the end, and by the time they pass away, they're skin and bones. And you think, not that it's good. I mean, we should try to be healthy. It's good not to be overweight and everything, but how we get obsessed with these things, and we fail to realize, even if we die with a good physical body, what does Holy Mother say about this body? Der ser chai. is just a few pounds of ashes once we're gone. That's all that it is. It's very helpful to really contemplate death. There's a long tradition. Shiva is the one that we always point to, meditating in the cremation ground. The Shaktas like to do that. It reminds us that this body will not last, that this life is a very fleeting thing. When I took my first trip to India, and I was in Benares, and I decided one night, let me spend the whole night at this Manikarnika Ghat, watching them burn the bodies. So I did it. I spent the whole night, because they do it continuously, day and night. I don't know for how many centuries. They claim, at least, there's not a moment when there's not a body dying. There'll be 7 different places, and if one goes out, there's another one burning. So yes, I watched one after another. They weren't happy with me there. They tried to yell at me and get me to leave, but anyhow, from a distance a little bit, I spent the whole night there, watching one after another. And there's something uplifting about it. Something uplifting about it. That I'm not this body after all. I know that. And if we lead a spiritual life, at some point we start to feel that death will be a kind of homecoming, not an end of things, a kind of a homecoming. There was a German poet by the name of Rilke. I took a course when I was in college in Rilke, but it was an early morning course, and I probably overslept most of the time. But I remember one of the poems was called Homecoming, and it was about death. And a very nice way to think of it. Remember the first song that Swamiji sang to Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar. This whole idea that we're strangers here. This is a strange land. We want to go back home. We want to go back home. This is not our real abode. That we feel somehow out of place here. That there's some type of longing to return, to go back to that source from which we came. So these are all parts of what it means to constantly think of death. It doesn't mean think of that moment of death and the pangs of death and whatever pain there'll be and the morbid aspect of it. It means let's remember we're here for a very short time. We've been sent out to play. We play with our games and we get tired of it and we want to go back to mother, like the child. Thakur gives that illustration very often. So yes, it's good to go to a cremation ground sometime and go hang out in a cemetery. Think of all the people, all the hard work they did to make a big name for themselves and to have lots of possessions. And what do they get? The very wealthy ones get a very big tomb. Huh? They'll get something, they can have a big mausoleum. They can even have a pyramid, if they're a pharaoh. But what good does it do them? They're not there to enjoy it. So one should constantly remember death. Nothing will survive death. We are born into this world to perform certain duties, like the people who come from the countryside to Calcutta on business. If a visitor goes to a rich man's garden, the superintendent says to him, "This is our garden." Usually Thakur talks about the maidservant, but this is the same example really. This is our lake and so forth. But if the superintendent is dismissed for some misdeed, he can't carry away even his mango wood chest. He sends it secretly by the gatekeeper. Laughter. So these things that we think are our possessions, even if we didn't die, they really don't belong to us. But the fact that we'll go, and then somebody else will live in the house that we're in, someone will sit on the chairs that we sit on, maybe even wear the clothes that we wear, it'll get sent to Goodwill. Anyhow, nothing will survive death. Now, Thakur changes the conversation a little bit. God laughs on 2 occasions. He laughs when the physician says to the patient's mother, "Don't be afraid, mother, I shall certainly cure your boy." God laughs, saying to himself, "I'm going to take his life." And this man says he will save it. The physician thinks he is the master, forgetting that God is the master. God laughs again when 2 brothers divide their land with a string, saying to each other, "This side is mine, and that side is yours." He laughs and says to himself, "The whole universe belongs to me." But they say, They own this portion or that portion. So Thakur is telling the Vidyasagar all of these things, just so he'll develop a little humility and dispassion. Not that he was a proud person, he was a good person. He was a very good person. He didn't have any selfish motive for all of these things, and yet he was so involved that this became his whole life. He was really not spiritual in the sense that he was introspective and had some higher goal of realization, anything like that. He was so wrapped up in doing this good deeds, which was not a bad thing, that Thakur was trying to send his mind inward, trying to show him that all of these things are impermanent. Whenever we see Thakur talking against people doing a lot of social service work, we have to understand that generally they're older people and the time has come for them. Say we'll get to this chapter, advice to Ishan, that Ishan was so involved in doing arbitration and meeting with other people and setting himself up as a overseer of all different arguments and things like that, that Thakur knew that he was deep within a very spiritual person. So Thakur may not say this to everybody and anybody. He knew that Vidyasagar just needed a little push to really get the fruits of all of the good deeds that he had done, because these good works are meant to purify us and to help us ultimately spiritually, as well as help other people. So this is why he's emphasizing these things, that you may think that you're helping other people, just as the doctor thinks that he's going to save someone. We don't know. We may try to do our best and the opposite may happen, and we simply don't know how these things work. Then he says, can one know God through reasoning? Be his servant. So he's emphasizing this because this seems to be the essential nature of Vidyasagar. This is one who does service. Be his servant, surrender yourself to him, and then pray to him. To Vidyasagar with a smile. Well, what is your attitude? Vidyasagar smiling. Someday I shall confide it to you. All laugh. He wasn't very anxious to talk about his own spiritual mood or spiritual attitude or anything. He was a bit of an agnostic, actually. He followed a lot of Orthodox Hindu customs, but in his life he was a little bit of not an atheist, a little bit of an agnostic. Master laughing. God cannot be realized through mere scholarly reasoning. Now Vidyasagar was a great scholar, but he wasn't a proud pundit. In fact, if he had any attachment, it was to these good works that he did. Intoxicated with divine love, the Master sang. This is one of the songs that Thakur sang most often. I've never done it, but if we did a study of the songs that Thakur sang, we would find that the greatest number will be Ram Prasad songs and songs to the Divine Mother. After that, he sang many, of course, Vaishnava songs also, and songs about Gauranga, Chaitanya Deva and everything, but this is one of the songs that he was most fond of. Who is there that can understand what Mother Kali is? Even the six darshanas are powerless to reveal her. This is a very nice line. Shad darshan, darshane napai darshan. This means that the six darshanas in all of the philosophical schools, you won't get the darshan. There's a play on words. Darshana means philosophy, philosophical schools, but it means the vision. You won't get the vision of God by studying philosophy. So who is there that can understand what Mother Kali is? Even the six darshanas are powerless to reveal her. It is she, the scriptures say, that is the inner self of the yogi, who in self discovers all his joy. She that of her own sweet will inhabits every living thing. So this idea of the Divine Mother, we'll see, corresponds to Ishvara, the idea we have of Ishvara, or the personal God, only we've added two things. This emphasis on this idea of Shakti, and the second is this motherliness, so that when we have this relationship, we can think of ourselves as a child who seeks shelter constantly with his own mother. The idea of Ishvara that we find in Gita especially is not simply Ishvara as the creator of this universe, but Ishvara dwelling in the heart. Dwelling in the heart and directing us to action. Either impelling us to action, maybe because of our past karma, maybe not, but as the Antaryaman, the inner controller. And even we have that one very powerful verse, making us run around in circles. Going around in circles, we think that we're making progress. We're simply going around in circles, not knowing that Ishvara dwelling within the hearts of all is making us do it because of Maya, because of our own ignorance. Then we get a very interesting line. The macrocosm and microcosm rest in the mother's womb. Sri Ramakrishna liked to talk about this. Swamiji also, he has some nice lectures, the microcosm and the macrocosm. Vyashti and samashti. In Vedantic philosophy, this means that we have an aggregate, which will be the combination of all individual things, and each individual thing will be a mirror of the whole thing. So that if we analyze the whole and we analyze the individual, we'll find the same relationship is mirrored in one that's in the other. So if we take the entire universe as the body of the divine, and God dwells within the heart of this universe, we'll find that each individual in the universe mirrors that I also have my own body and God also dwells within. So God is dwelling within me and within this entire universe. So the macrocosm and the microcosm rest in the mother's womb. So she's the source of all that. We're dwelling within her. And now do you see how vast it is? In the Muladhara, now we'll get reference to the Kundalini idea, the yogi meditates on her, and in the Sahasrara, who but Shiva has beheld her as she really is? Within the lotus wilderness she sports beside her mate, the swan. Now this is all that idea that we can understand this spiritual attainment as the rising of this Kundalini power. So the Divine Mother is manifesting herself as power within the universe, macrocosm, and also within the individual, the microcosm, in terms of the Kundalini. So as this Kundalini rises, going through the different chakras with different lotuses, and then the lotuses bloom, we have different types of experiences. When Kundalini rises to the head, the 1,000-petaled lotus there, Sahasrara, then this highest illumination is supposed to take place. Symbolically, it's thought of as the Divine Mother, Kundalini, the Shakti, who dwells in the Muladhara, the lowest plane, in the unenlightened human being, the ordinary person. That means not just Muladhara, the three lower planes. This is what Thakur used to say, which means that we're interested in eating and sleeping and ordinary worldly things. That Divine Mother, that Shakti, is trying to unite with Shiva, who dwells in the top. This is all symbolic language. It means that we're trying to achieve union with the higher self, or with the Paramatman, the Supreme Self, or Brahman dwelling within. So who but Shiva has beheld her as she really is? Within the lotus wilderness she sports beside her mate, the swan. That means the absolute Paramahamsa, the soul, Hamsa. When man aspires to understand her, Ram Prasad must smile. This is the way they indicate that they're the author. They'll stick their name in there somehow. Ram Prasad must smile. To think of knowing her, he says, is quite as laughable as to imagine one can swim across the boundless sea. Now, does this mean we can't unite with the mother, we can have the highest realization. No. It means that through reasoning we can never understand her, and that when we have that state, enter that state of union with mother, then this ordinary mind won't be there to try to analyze or figure out anything. So there's no knowing that way, the way we know other things. As to imagine one can swim across the boundless sea, but while my mind is understood, alas, my heart has not. Though but a dwarf, it still would strive to make a captive of the moon. Now, imagine he's sitting there with Vidyasagar, a room full of strangers. Some of these people are there without the least interest in anything spiritual. They're trying to get money from Vidyasagar, and he's singing these songs and going into ecstasy and everything. Continuing, the master said, did you notice? The macrocosm and the microcosm rest in the mother's womb. Now do you see how vast it is? Again, the poet says, even the six darshanas are powerless to reveal her. And then Sri Ramakrishna continues, she cannot be realized by means of mere scholarship. So we know that the role of analysis, we know what the role of scriptural study is. It's to get us on the path. It's to get us to develop some conviction regarding the truth of the scriptures. We have to understand these things. If we simply say, I don't understand it, but it's in the scriptures, so I'll believe it, then it doesn't do us any good. Without this conviction, we won't be able to stick on the path when these big obstacles come. Then we'll say, oh, maybe these things aren't true, why did I believe all of these things? If we analyze first, and it appeals to our sense of reasoning, we'd say, yes, this makes sense. And then we see someone who has had that experience. Yes, I know it's real. We develop that conviction. Then we don't have to keep going back and analyzing again and again, but we'll realize that has given us this great inner strength. Conviction brings great inner strength in spiritual life. Thakur says, Vishwas, he says the very final, this is the final stage. Of course, that yearning is necessary, but we won't get any of it unless we have this conviction. One must have faith and love. So we need this conviction. We need some emotional tie. And it doesn't even have to be in a very dualistic, devotional type of way. It can be this tremendous longing for truth. When we look at the life of Buddha, how he was ready to give up everything. He gave up the life of the palace and a wife and a child and all of that in search of truth. That was that tremendous love of truth and that tremendous longing to shake off this ignorance, to this feeling that this life is not worth living in this way, when we don't know why we're here, what we're doing, what the goal is, what the point of it all is. And if we become convinced that there are answers to these questions, and there are people who can give these answers and they can tell us what to do and how to get there, then we'll do it. We'll feel that tremendous longing to do it. That's also love. So one must have faith and love. Let me tell you how powerful faith is. A man was about to cross the sea from Ceylon to India. Bibhishana said to him, tie this thing in a corner of your wearing cloth. He didn't tell her what it was. Tie this thing in the corner of your wearing cloth and you will cross the sea safely. You will be able to walk on the water, but be sure not to examine it or you will sink. The man was walking easily on the water of the sea. Such is the strength of faith, when, having gone part of the way, he thought, what is this wonderful thing Bibhishana has given me that I can walk even on the water? He untied the knot. Bibhishana said, don't untie it. He untied the knot and found only a leaf with the name of Rama written on it. Oh, just this, he thought, and instantly he sank. So, was it the power of the name on the leaf, or was it the power of the faith that he had? The name, of course, is something special, but without the faith in it. So Thakur is emphasizing this idea of faith. Without the faith, he was unable to take advantage of it. There's a popular saying that Hanuman jumped over the sea through his faith in Rama's name, but Rama himself had to build a bridge. So this is a case where the devotee is greater than the object of devotion. We find that if we really analyze very carefully, in most cases, I have this conviction that Radha was greater than Krishna, as Sita was greater than Rama. That who is the greater ideal for us? That the Sita, how long suffering she was. Radha, how the whole mind was given to Krishna. If we look at it from that point of view, we see Hanuman, how he's the ideal. Ram is not so much the ideal, the object of worship. Of course, he's standing for the higher self and everything. But the ideal means how we want to see ourselves, what we want to mold ourselves in order to make us the ideal devotee, in order to have that realization. So, this is pointing to that idea that in terms of the tremendous power of faith, Hanuman was greater than Rama. If a man has faith in God, then don't be offended, anyone who's a great Rama worshipper. He also represented a very great ideal. If a man has faith in God, then he need not be afraid, though he may have committed sin, nay, the vilest sin. Now, Sri Ramakrishna had a little teaching technique that he used to use, that if he had a song in mind that he wanted to sing, and he had a point that he wanted to make, he would first reference a line from that song. We're wondering, why did he say this? That if you've committed a vile sin. We'll find that because it's in the song that he's about to sing. So it's a very, very common thing that Thakur used to do. So he said, if a man has faith in God, then he need not be afraid, though he may have committed sin, nay, the vilest sin. Then Sri Ramakrishna sang a song glorifying the power of faith. If only I can pass away remembering Durga's name, how canst thou then, O Blessed One, withhold from me deliverance, wretched though I may be? And then the song goes on to say, though I may have killed a cow or a Brahmin or all different things. One of the things that M did when he wrote this Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, of course in Bengali, is that he wouldn't always give the entire song. Now, Sri Ramakrishna probably sang the entire song because we see ... afterwards. He would give the entire song usually the first time. And then after that, he would just give the first few lines, just to keep the book from getting too big, probably. Now, one exception that I noticed, every once in a while there may have been a song that M was hearing for the first time. And maybe then he'll write the first few lines and then afterwards do the whole thing. That very famous song, I've given my heart to thee, all that exists art thou. That one, we don't get the full thing till the end. But generally, so I don't remember, probably we've already had this song once. But the rest of the song, it has that line, though I may have committed a vilest sin. The Master continued, faith and devotion. And devotion, he's talking about, I don't know what the word is, anurag. Probably he's talking about this really tremendous love, this otherworldly type of love. One realizes God easily through devotion. He is grasped through ecstasy of love. With these words, the Master sang again. We'll get another Ram Prasad song. How are you trying, O my mind, to know the nature of God? You were groping like a madman, locked in a dark room. He is grasped through ecstatic love. How can you fathom him without it? Only through affirmation, never negation, can you know him. Neither through Veda, nor through Tantra, nor the 6 darshanas. Same theme that we had before. It is in love's elixir only that he delights, O mind. He dwells in the body's inmost depths in everlasting joy. And for that, now we're getting he. It could have easily been she. In Bengali, they use the same word. she or tini. They use the same word for he and she. They don't have two different words for it. So it's up to the translator to guess. I would prefer she here, because Ramaprasad is really talking about the Divine Mother. So it is in love's elixir only that she delights, O mind. She dwells in the body's inmost depths in everlasting joy, and for that love the mighty yogis practice yoga from age to age. When love awakes, the Lord, like a magnet, draws to him the soul, or to her. It is he it is, she it is, says Ramaprasad, that I approach as mother. Okay. But must I give away the secret here in the marketplace? From the hints I've given, O mind, guess what that being is. Now, what is this affirmation and negation? Why does he say only through the path of negation, neti neti, is a well-known path that's used for the jnanis, the Advaitins, where we try to separate the self from the non-self. So when we say that, no, I am not this body, I'm not this mind, this is that path of negation. That we can't say anything positive about the real nature of the self. So what we do is we eliminate everything that it's not, and that what remains, what is what remains. It's a very good path. But what Ramaprasad is saying, and what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, is that this can take us to that impersonal aspect. If we want the personal and impersonal both, Sri Ramakrishna, he puts more emphasis on the path of devotion. He says that devotion can take us to the inner court, to the inner sanctuary of the palace. We can get inside through the path of knowledge. That will take us to this impersonal absolute. For Sri Ramakrishna, the highest realization is both, that God is both impersonal and personal. The typical devotee doesn't like this impersonal aspect, and the jnani typically doesn't like this personal aspect. Thakur liked them both, and they said they both belong to the same reality. Don't shortchange yourself, and don't simply follow this path that gets to the impersonal absolute, that through this path of devotion you'll see both saguna and nirguna aspect. You'll see God with form, without form, impersonal, and with the personality and the personality of the Divine Mother, and feel the joy and bliss, because when the mind comes down, it can experience the bliss of that relationship. While singing, the master went into samadhi. This always happened, and this is what would impress the visitors most, because most of them had never seen anything like this. It was a very rare thing. Even these great pundits, I forget which one of them came, and after seeing Thakur's samadhi, he said, now we understand that we've simply been carrying the weight of these books on our backs all of the time. We've never realized the truth of it. It's only Sri Ramakrishna. He's been able to really taste the joy that's there. We're only carrying the books on our heads. Something like that. So this was very significant. Not that he's planning to do it ahead of time, but if we're talking about a teaching technique, this is a great teaching technique. Let them see that what I'm talking about, what Ramaprasad is singing about, is not mere words, that this state is something that is real. And of course, when he comes down from that state of samadhi, he'll be in this ecstatic mood. And they'll get to see what it means to have this bliss, the bliss of the Divine Mother. He was seated on the bench facing west, the palms of his hands joined together, his body erect and motionless. Everyone watched him expectantly. Vidyasagar too was speechless and could not take his eyes from the master. See, very often these people would be tremendously impressed with Sri Ramakrishna. We've never seen anyone like him. Such love of God, such ecstasy. And then he would go, and they would go back to being their own selves. It wouldn't have that transforming power for them. Somebody like M, the second he saw Sri Ramakrishna, he knew. So there were those who were part of this Leela also, that they were born to be part of this divine play of Sri Ramakrishna, and there are others who simply had that inner stuff, that they could catch that divine fire that Sri Ramakrishna had because they were ready for it. Vidyasagar, we don't know to what extent he was transformed or changed or influenced at all, but certainly not to the extent that he might have been. After a time, Sri Ramakrishna showed signs of regaining the normal state. He drew a deep breath and said with a smile, "The means of realizing God are ecstasy of love and devotion. That is, one must love God. He who is Brahman is addressed as the mother." Now, this is a very important philosophical position that Sri Ramakrishna had. He never thought of the Divine Mother as anything separate from Brahman. When the Jnani talks about Brahman as Nirguna Brahman, impersonal, absolute, and devoid of any gunas, Nirguna, impersonal, and without any form, without any qualities, he used to say, yes, this is one aspect. And when we say that there are no gunas, when they say there's no power, there's no Shakti there, it means that there's an aspect of Brahman that transcends that. And also there's a time when this Shakti is not active, when it's simply potential. But it's always there. It's always there. If some power can be activated at some time, that means that it's there when it's not active. It means it's in a potential form. So, he it is, says Ram Prasad. Now he's quoting for another song, and we assume singing, that I approach as mother. He it is that I approach as mother. So Thakur says, he who is Brahman is addressed as the mother. So they're not two different things. Only Brahman means Nirguna and Saguna, both together. Not Brahman here, Ishvara here, Hiranyagarbha here, with all of these different distinctions. There's only one. Ram Prasad asked the mind only to guess the nature of God. He wishes it to understand that what is called Brahman in the Vedas is addressed by him as the mother. He who is attributeless also has attributes. It's just like any individual that we talk about a person, that person has attributes. That person, a good person, a kind person, a very sattvic person, rajasic person, whatever it is. And at the same time, if we're talking about the person as the real self, the Atman, then there are no attributes. Both are true, looking at it from two different points of view. He who is Brahman is also Shakti. When thought of as inactive, he is called Brahman, and when thought of as the creator, preserver, and destroyer, he is called the primordial energy, Kali. Brahman and Shakti are identical like fire and its power to burn. Now, I want to just take a minute and talk about this phrase because we hear it all of the time. This is Brahman and Shakti. Thakur says, Abhed. Abhed. Now, I question sometimes if identical is the best translation for this. Because here we're saying fire and its power to burn. Is the power to burn identical with fire itself? Abheda means inseparable, that you can't have one without the other, that they come together. They come together, one without the other, and so you can't, like substance and attribute, you can't have a table without a color, and you can't have a color that doesn't belong to something. So it's not that they're identical if we think of Shakti as power and Brahman as the seed, Adhar, the seed of power. But sometimes when Thakur talks about Shakti, he's talking about the Divine Mother, which means he's not talking about the power, because for him, you can't have power that doesn't belong to Brahman. He's talking about Brahman together with its power. From that point of view, then they are identical. Then they're not just indistinguishable or inseparable, they're one and the same. So when he talks about Kali, then it's not that Brahman and Kali are inseparable, they're one and the same. When he says Shakti, if he means power, then they're inseparable. When he says Shakti and he means Kali, then they're one and the same. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. Does that make sense? Okay. So because he says like fire and its power to burn. They have to be together. So this power to create the universe can't be something separate from Brahman. And if that's true, then Brahman, we can't think of Brahman. If we think of Brahman without the power to create, then we can't explain this universe. Where does it come from? Does it just come into being on its own? Brahman alone exists. Brahman is pure consciousness. If that Chit Shakti, if the power to project this universe is not there, we can't explain this universe. Somebody says, well, it's just an imaginary universe. Okay. And then we can't explain this imaginary universe. There's something other than pure consciousness. Nobody can deny that. Whether we say it's real or imaginary or a projection or a dream or anything, so we say it's a dream. Then where did the dream come from? There has to be some power which allows Brahman to dream even. So the Shakti has to be there, unless, if it weren't there, then there would just be consciousness. There wouldn't be anything, just pure consciousness. Whatever there is at the time of Pralaya, this in-between period when there's no creation. But even then, this creation is there, it's just unmanifest. So Thakur's position is a very strong position. The Advaitins, this is a very weak point for them. They have a very difficult time explaining how, starting with Nirguna Brahman as the only reality, how we can explain the existence of this universe. They bring in this idea of Maya, which is a little bit philosophically tenuous position. Anyhow, Brahman and Shakti are identical, like fire and its power to burn. When we talk of fire, we automatically mean also its power to burn. Again, the fire's power to burn implies the fire itself. If you accept one, you must accept the other. Brahman alone is addressed as the mother. This is because a mother is an object of great love. One is able to realize God just through love. Ecstasy of feeling, devotion, love, and faith. These are the means. Then he'll sing another song. So there are two very important ideas here. One is a beautiful philosophical idea that this Brahman has to have some power within it. Even if it's a power to delude, and this power, but it has to have something. Otherwise, we can't explain anything, or we have to have this a whole second reality. Second thing, which may be even more important, is that looking upon God as mother allows the heart to open up and to expand. And this is what spiritual life and practice is all about, this expansion of the heart, this ability to raise the mind to a higher level, allow this Brahman to have this power of attraction that the mother has for the child for the mother, so that we can be pulled up. So it's this psychological element and the love element that is equally important. Time to stop. Okay, so we'll stop here. Excuse me. And continue next time, and I'll do the closing chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamanantarupam Bhaktanugam Bhatudha Vai Ishavataram Parameshamedhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.